Good afternoon. As I promised in this video, the whole goal of this video is to introduce you to what is a motherboard. This particular motherboard we are talking about is an ASUS series P5GC-MX motherboard. What is the lesson for the day? The lesson is, what is a motherboard? Let's say you're new to this whole thing, or you want to do some Bitmining, or you want to do some videoing on YouTube or something like what I'm doing. So I thought, well, no one's really making a simple motherboard video. I decided that I would. So basically, what is a motherboard? A motherboard is basically a processor, memory, which is located in the back in its slot, a chipset, and all the different forms of input and output. So before we explain this and what it represents, let me give you an idea, a picture, in a simple format of what this is about. The processor is at the top of what you would consider a pyramid. It's the fastest processing, it has the most capable resources, and it's very fast. Secondly, you have your memory. It's very fast, but not quite as fast as the CPU, and has to reside down here with the chipset, which is the next level. The way a motherboard works is it has a bunch of highways, and if you look in on the motherboard, you'll see those highways as little lines and stretches and so on. Those are what we call data pathways. They have the ability of providing input and output from very fast to very slow for the motherboard. So let's start with the slowest and the most common known. These are ports that are on the very low end of your bandwidth and your processing ability to retain input and send out output. This is the most common one, known as a VGA port or Video Graphics Adapter port. It's the output to your computer screen. These were the old style USB PS2 mouse and keyboard, and this is the newer USB mouse and keyboard interface that's out there, as well as extra USB ports, network connectivity, sound card, and the very slowest of the motherboard is the serial port 9-pin and the parallel port. Next, you also have additional inputs and outputs here for internal connectivity that actually is just about as fast as the back ports on the motherboard. We've seen the tallest and fastest in the pyramid, and we've seen back here, along with our ports and the back ports, the slowest. Now we look at the faster level, and that starts off with our floppy drive connector. Yes, believe it or not, it's pretty fast. Your old style IDE cable interface, your basic SATA for hard drive connectivity and CD-ROM connectivity, just like IDE, and then specialized SATA connections such as RAID 1, which allows you to mirror two hard drives. We'll talk about that later. Then probably the closest thing to the memory and processor is the PCI-E 1 and 16 slots. They're very fast. And then secondly, the PCI slots, which are about 32-bit or 32 highways versus 64. So when you take all the different type of peripheral devices, such as mice and keyboards and printers and so on, and you connect them to these parts, they're the slowest part of the whole system, opposed to the more higher performance-based connections that exist for your hard drives and so on. The thing to remember is pyramid. Slowest, middle, fastest. This allows you to understand that this rule of thumb applies to all systems, including laptops. Now, as you're learning to work with motherboards like this one, you'll discover that these port connections are unique. Actually, they're that way everywhere. If you look at the motherboard, you'll see how each plug-up is unique. That's important. That allows you not to make the mistake of plugging something in backwards. Having a connection set up like this allows you never to make the mistake of connecting something in reverse, therefore protecting your system. Now, believe it or not, this is pretty much it. This doesn't matter if it's a motherboard like this for an i3, 5, and 7, or if it's a Raspberry Pi that you're playing with for an experiment, or if it's a printer. Believe it or not, a printer has a motherboard, processor, RAM, or a laptop, which is a condensed version of a motherboard with 32-bit pathways for a total of 64-bit. But this guy here, he's pretty fast. He's 64-bit double. That's 128-bit pathway when you count them together. So this is the basic lesson about a motherboard. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll let you go.